You guys are good.
Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead and call this Board of Supervisors meeting to order, and nice day, nice rain, and we all know how important rain is to this country. And I've asked Supervisor Ron Campbell to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Campbell. We'll now go to agenda item 1B, call to the public. Anyone like to address the board and call to the public? Seeing none, we'll go to agenda item 2. The Board of Supervisors will convene as the Board of Directors of Greene County Public Health Service District, and will reconvene as the Board of Supervisors following consideration of these items. Consent agenda.
So move that we approve the consent agenda as posted.
I'll second that.
Have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. We are now convened as the Board of Supervisors, and the Board of Supervisors will convene as the Board of Directors of Greene County Flood Control District. And after the order of business, we'll reconvene as the Board of Supervisors. A consent agenda.
So move that we approve the consent agenda as posted.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have motion and second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. We are now convened as the Board of Supervisors, and we will go to agenda item 4. Mr. Sumner. Welcome.
Thank you. It's Tim Sumner, Greene County Sheriff, members of the board and staff. This item here is one that was discussed quite some time back. It was state appropriated funds, specifically that they set up for some school safety to try to get some systems within the schools to make a better seamless transition of response times. There's a presentation from a Mark Taylor here with Mutual Link. I think he's already forwarded the information or got in touch with IT to be able to present the presentation and give a copy to your clerk afterwards. So my part will be pretty brief. I first brought this up in 2021 when the state legislature first appropriated this money. And we've already done the first phase of the work with that pot of money that was there, about $189,000. This other money came in last December of 22. The next appropriation, which again was from the state of the $500,000. You'll see on this that this is a sole source provider that we're looking at moving forward with a continuation of the phases that we're in to provide for the school safety and first responders as their response. And that includes all first responders, not just the sheriff's office. It's all police, fire, EMS, and then tied in with the schools. Anyways, one other piece I wanted to point out before the presentation from Mark Taylor here is you'll see the amount of $500,000. That discussion with Renee and Derek recently about the you can see on the contract the disbursements of that. Disbursements are made in a 50%, 25%, and 25% based on different benchmarks along that contract that you can see that was provided. And along those lines, the first amount, the $250,000, is all that would be approved and paid for in this fiscal year. So even though the full amount is being requested right now to approve the full contract to move on with this next phase of $500,000, only $250,000, that first 50% would be paid now. The remainder of 25% would be after July 1st. It'd be the next fiscal year. So I want to make sure that was clear. I also spoke with Mutual Link about that because in the deliverables in the contract, there's nothing about any date along that line of July 1st. When I had that conversation and have correspondence, I wanted to be on record that they've assured that it would fall within the next fiscal year after July 1. And if for some reason a benchmark was made before that, which incorporated that 25%, it could easily be invoiced to make sure it was after July 1st of when it was due upon payment. So anyways, just want to point that part out. I'll let Mark Taylor come forth and go and do the presentation of Mutual Link, kind of get everybody I'll just be a reminder of what it is and what the program is that was paid for by the state here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Morning,
Morning.
members of the board, chairman, appreciate your time. I'm Mark Taylor with MutualLink. Here just kind of give an update as to where we are, where we've been for phase one, where we're going for phase two, and what that looks like for Greenlee County and the schools and law enforcement, public safety agencies that are involved in all of this. So as Sheriff Sumner mentioned, we did just finish up phase one. So phase one is building out the infrastructure for the schools and for all the law enforcement partners. So this is the big undertaking as far as getting all the infrastructure, the cameras, getting in all of the wireless technology, the software, the training, everything up and running throughout the schools and through the law enforcement partnerships. So far we've created that expedited 911 system between the schools and law enforcement. So we've installed panic buttons at all the schools. So schools have both a soft panic button and a hardened panic button to alert law enforcement in the event of an active shooter. We've given the school leaders the exact click-to-talk notification amongst law enforcement. So if you've had a chance to read that Uvalde shooting report that just came out, there was a documentary on PBS and then a full 600-page report that came out from the DOJ. A lot of this I'm going to kind of refer back to because it is so fresh in everything that we're doing here. That was one of the big things that came out of Uvalde was there was no communication between law enforcement and school officials during those 77 minutes from the first call to when law enforcement finally took down the gunman. We're also going to connect public safety agencies to the schools to share that information. So that was part of phase one. I've got a slide to kind of go into what phase two looks like. So the infrastructure is there to get phase one done in terms of getting that information shared. Phase two is going to expand that exponentially here. And then we've already connected all of the law enforcement, fire, EMS. We've connected Duncan, Morenci, Greenlee County. We've connected in all the schools as well, and as well as all the fire EMS partners within Greenlee County. So again, all of that is already done. That infrastructure is put in place. And now the hard work is done. Now we're working into expanding that system and really getting this to be that functional system that you're looking for as the board. So what's next? The Sheriff Sumner mentioned that we've got the phase one contract that we're looking for this next go around. That infrastructure is going to allow us to build out continuing infrastructure for the Blue School District. So right now we've been working on Blue School District that is going to be moving forward here with phase two. We've expanded the video capabilities. So there was some cameras that we were going to provide at MutualLink's cost that's going to help and expand that system that Morenci and Duncan already have at their schools. That will be forthcoming in this next phase. This next bullet point, I'm going to go into a little bit further on my next slide, but it's our premier product. Premier product is the remote view, which allows for a much greater functionality and a lot bigger information sharing amongst these responses during the event. So I'll kind of go into that a little bit more on this next slide. And then we're going to continue to configure those licenses. We're going to continue to train the teachers, train law enforcement on the upcoming features that are coming out, and then train. Again, that's something that came out of the Uvalde documentary was that there was not a lot of training. The teachers at the response teams, nobody knew what was going on. There was no command. There was no way to communicate. So again, a lot of those things that came out of that Uvalde report we're addressing with this system here. Already done a lot of it in phase one. Phase two is going to further expand on that and really make sure that we keep our commitment here to these kids and tiers agencies. This is the remote view that I was talking about. So this remote view looks like just simple as a map. There's not much to it from just looking at it from the high level here. But what this does is when an emergency were to happen at one of your schools, this is going to pop up both at law enforcement, at the educators, as well as the dispatch center. So dispatch will now be able to allow communication and collaborative communication across multiple agencies, multiple law enforcement agencies, fire, EMS, and even cross county and state line. We're bringing in multiple jurisdictions here that will share the same platform and collaborate over the same amount of information. So we're all going to be working from the same map. Again, came out of Uvalde. I don't know where classroom 111 and 112 is. Now we all know. Now we're all working from the same map, working from the same piece of information. Each one of those red dots on there, it may be tough to see. Those are cameras. We're going to allocate and access those cameras. So now law enforcement can actually pinpoint and pick out where those cameras are angled at. Doesn't do me any good if I've got 24 cameras on a screen and I need to know where quadrant 4B is. Doesn't do me any good because I don't know where that is on the school. This is going to allow me and law enforcement to see exactly where that classroom is, allow us to give specific directions as to where that shooter is, how to make entrance, and how to take down this threat. So those are all things that we're working on right now. It's going to tie in the access control that your schools have. So we'll be able to lock and unlock doors remotely, ties in the cameras, and it also ties in where those assets are that we have within the school, whether that be teachers or other technology that can be brought into the incident. So with your investment you've already made a substantial investment into your computer, building out the initial infrastructure. What phase two is, it continues that investment on a much larger scale. So we're still focusing on the law enforcement partners. We're still focusing on the schools, continuing to build that out. With this infrastructure, it allows for a much bigger scale to be able to communicate and connect with Gila County, Graham County, even cross state lines. So we're able to communicate now with your partners, your schools across this platform. So it's not just a school safety project that we're working here in Greenlee County. It's now it's a statewide. It'll very, very quickly become a nationwide as we're working with other agencies in New Mexico as well to really bring this across the border here. So that's what we're working on right now. That's what phase one looks like. That's what phase two looks like for Greenlee County. Where we're moving forward with your schools as well as your law enforcement and fire EMS partners. So, any questions?
What's the longevity of this equipment? I mean, you install it, and I know you're a sole provider, but how long can we expect this system to be extremely functionable?
So that's a great question. So the software itself is going to have updates constantly. So we continually push out updates. You will get those updates and deployed out to both the front end and the back end devices. As far as the hardware, we're using a lot of network routers, which have 5, 8, 10-year lifespans on them. We do have alert systems in place. If something were to go down, they do alert our side as well as your IT teams to let us know that there is something going on and we've lost that communication to get that replaced and taken care of.
This is a state deal, and you are a sole provider, and like I say, our schools are very important to us, our children, and safety. We have a president of the Morenci School Board sitting here, and I know how much he cares about the safety of the kids. And they had an incident yesterday with electricity, and they made a call to not bring the kids in. So please do a good job.
We appreciate your support. We appreciate that. Thank you.
I just had a good question. So I know that it's primarily, active shooter, right? Are there other emergencies that happen within the schools that you would use this system for? I mean, you mentioned fire and that type of thing. What are the limitations, or when can you access the system? If there's a fight in the hallway or something like that, I mean, can you use this system in the same manner, or is it only primarily for active shooter?
Phenomenal question. Yes. So the answer to that is yes on both fronts of that. So it's designed and funded as an active shooter, cross collaboration, cross agency platform for communication and file sharing. What it can be used for in addition to that is far beyond that. So a lot of times I talk to schools that can be using it for telehealth. So since your fire EMS already has it, if there's a patient or student on the ground that fell off a playground, the teacher can actually dial into law enforcement, create an incident, and share that video of the patient while he's on the ground underneath the monkey bars, getting firsthand information directly from the first responders as they're en route to the scene. We can use it for that. We can use it for football games. So if there's a rivalry football game, we can create an incident within Mutual Link that now brings in off-duty officers. It brings in principals and parents, putting them all in the same network so they're all talking on the same platform, sharing the same information. There's a kid vaping in the parking lot. I can send a picture out of that person. I can send a bolo out of a missing child to everybody that's on my incident. So yes, it can be used for all of that. It can be used for floods. So if there's floods or there's a power incident going on, all of that, anytime we need to create an incident out, we can go ahead and invite individual people in manually from that standpoint. So that's outside of the active shooter side of things. If it's an active shooter, it will be done automatically. So we sit down with the schools, we sit down with your law enforcement, fire EMS agencies to set up an emergency response plan that's already all been done and continuing to be worked through the process. When that panic button is hit from within the school, all of the ERP is done automatically where all those resources are brought in. It can be done after the fact and brought in manually to address some of those items that we just discussed.
Okay, thank you.
Great question.
Yes, right. If there's no other questions, a motion would be in order.
Are you done with your presentation?
I am, yeah.
Okay, good.
Excellent. Appreciate it. Thank you for your time, Chairman.
Thank you.
Board.
Mr. Taylor.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I want to take time to thank the sheriff. This was brought up in December and it had been 2 years since we'd seen him, and Renee and I were caught a little bit flat-footed, and I wanted to express our appreciation for him to give us a little bit of time to get our feet back under us, understand where we are at. I visited with the schools, they see value in this. And I wanted to publicly thank the sheriff for giving us the time to, like I said, to get our head wrapped around this again before we move forward. It is state money, and so we'll go with that.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Okay, motion would be in order if there's no further discussion.
Well, I move that we approve of the contract with Mutual Link as a sole source provider to provide components of an emergency intro. Now, I've had difficulty with that word. Huh? Interoperability, all right. System between Greenlee County Sheriff's Office and school districts in Greenlee County in the total amount of $500,000, $250,000 of which will be spent in the current fiscal year to be paid exclusively with funds provided by the state for this purpose.
And I second that motion.
Okay, we have motion, excuse me, we have motion and second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Thank you very again.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Now go to agenda item 5. We have Tony Hine, Public Works Fleet Facility Manager. And on 5C, the sheriff has asked to.
Good morning, Tony Hines, Facilities and Fleet Manager. Friday, May, we have the shade structure at the Loma Linda Park. A week ago, last Friday, my employee got there early in the morning to start his cleaning and do everything, and noticed that the center section for that metal shade structure had fell down. So we proceeded to take everything down except for the legs, just for safety. We thank God that nobody was there. It happened at night or early in the morning when nobody was around. That thing's pretty heavy, and took 2 of us to carry it out. So what we're looking to do is to replace that shade with a metal structure. We had talked about this before. This gives us the opportunity to do it instead of rebuilding this structure. Take it down, go back with the metal building like we had talked about, and go for that. So we're looking to get some guidance on going out for bids on that, or doing the same as what we did for the buildings in Duncan. Now, it's comparable to the size of the dance floor that we got approved there. That dance floor came in at like 85,000. That's a 60 by 70. This will be a 40 by 50 roughly. So we're going to be about in the same price range. And fundings we have for that are either the ARPA funds or the capital improvement funds.
So now, I just have a quick comment question. So none of the material, not even the posts can be utilized on that structure, Tony?
I wouldn't recommend it if we're going to go with a different type of structure, because every time you adjust something to fit what you need, usually doesn't work out well. I have some pictures if I may.
Sure, please.
This part of the elbow on it was bent on 2 sides, so it fell off of one side first, bent down. Well, so if you adjust that or anything, I think it'd be compromised structure.
I guess the next question, do we have funds in either one of those that would be able to use this? And what's the time frame we're looking at? And of course, that depends on which way we go. So
We certainly have funds in the ARPA. As we know, there's been some savings in some of our projects. We did not, for example, do anything with the medical software. That's, I think, 13,000. Our tent, which was already on order and en route, will come in a little under the, I think, the 25-year mark for that. We also have the $500,000, there's a little less than $500,000 left in land acquisition. And then we built in $184,000 for cost overruns and unexpected expenses. So we certainly could hit ARPA with this, and we've got some capacity there. Our capital projects funds. We have we have sufficient between that and what we call our building and grounds maintenance fund, which is for just eventualities like this, when something unexpected happens. For example, when our well collapsed in the Duncan Fairgrounds, we're gonna be drilling that out of our building and grounds funds. So yes, we have the funds to put this up.
Tony, the company that's doing the building there at the fairgrounds, if they bid this, would they be able to do them simultaneously and get us a lower bid for doing this at the same time because they'd already be here?
I haven't contacted them on that yet, but I can ask them that question.
Yeah, because they wouldn't have to mobilize. Go back again.
Right.
The only difference is that we're separated by about 30 miles between the two locations. But it never hurts to ask that question.
Yeah.
And,
Good question. Go ahead, Tony.
and with the issues that we had getting quotes for the other two buildings, I think we'll be in the same boat. Not getting anybody to do it, so Ward Brothers out of Safford would probably the only one to bid.
And that was part of my question is who did we have that actually participated in the bid at the fairgrounds? I know you had a bid and then Ward
Yeah.
Brothers was the only bidder,
Right.
correct? So I mean, it makes sense. To me, it makes sense to sole source to or single source to Ward Brothers and just lump that in and see what we could do to negotiate the
Price.
the better price.
Do that.
It sounds like you had some assistance in tearing down the dance floor and stuff there at the fairgrounds, right?
We did, yeah.
Mother
Same one that
Nature.
assisted us on the Loma Linda Park.
Right. Okay. Anyway, that would be my recommendation that we single source to the Ward Brothers and work in negotiation to lump that other structure in with their other two that they're doing at the fairgrounds.
That's a motion.
Well,
Second.
I guess I can make a motion that we single source for the metal shade structure to go over the Loma Linda Park playground to Ward Brothers. That would be my official motion.
I would second that motion.
Okay, just, we have a motion and a second, and it's open for discussion. Aren't we by law supposed to go out for? We still have to go out for bids on this, right? We can't just already award the bid for something. I'm just asking a question.
It's an excellent question, and it's one I've contemplated myself. I think if we, I think the wisest thing would be to amend the motion to direct us to see if we can do that and give us permission to go out to bid if we cannot. Because like I said, I know how hard Tony beat the bushes, and that was just a few weeks ago, and people wouldn't even pick up the phone and call us back. But we should make certain that that's the right way to go. The estimated cost as well. Our process for under $100,000 bids is sealed written bids as opposed to, written quotes, not sealed written bids. And so we could certainly go out and beat the bushes again and see if anybody responds. But I think if we amend the motion to either go back out and get new quotes or to amend the quote that we have, and that'll give us flexibility to come back to you with a decision in very short order.
I have a question. Tony, who's the owner of the business there? No, the gentleman's name. Who's the owner?
Joe Ward.
Joe Martin? Ward. Oh, Joe Ward.
Yeah, him and his brother, I believe.
Because I thought there was another metal outfit out of Graham County that built all the hangars at the airport and stuff and I'm not sure that I'm just asking the name because I'm not sure who that person is, but I know that individual has done a lot of metal work in Graham County. So I was kind of wondering why, if he's still in business, why he didn't bid out.
Tom Sawyer Metals. I had Tom Sawyer and Ward Brothers come out to look at the D building and the dance floor. Ward Brothers came back at time after time, and Tom Sawyer never contacted back.
Well, I'm on board with the recommendation that Derek gets to amend,
Yeah,
to amend the,
to amend the motion.
yeah,
May I state it and you address it?
yeah.
Please.
The amended motion would be to direct staff to make sure that going to Ward Brothers as a single source provider is appropriate under our purchasing policy, and to then proceed either with a single source procurement or to come back with written bids in a conjunction with our procurement policy.
My favorite words, so moved.
And I second that motion.
Okay, so now we'll vote on the amendment and then we'll vote on the main motion. So all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Amendment passes. Now we'll vote on the main motion. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes. Thank you very, very much. We'll now go to 5B.
Item B, we have the vehicle for the engineering department. We went out to bid on vehicles this year. One of them included a pickup for the engineer. Few special items on it that he wanted was just a better off-road package than what we normally get. So we went out for that and we got the bid back. And then I got a call from Kempton saying that the Trail Boss package is not available in the fleet area. So we can't get that from fleet, so we have to get it out of regular purchasing. And it would be about $2,800 to $3,000 higher. I haven't got the final price yet because they haven't got the truck in yet. So it's a vehicle that was ordered by Kempton's for their stock that we would just purchase off of Kempton's. Now, normally we get a fleet discount because we order them through the fleet side of the business, but this one's not available for that.
And what are those items that you just
In
mentioned?
the Trail Boss, the
It's
options.
It's a Trail Boss option. It has better suspension, off-road tires, stuff like that. The clearance is higher. The vehicle that the engineer has now is very low to the ground. And it has a 1-speed transfer case. So the areas that he goes, it would better fit him to have a 2-speed transfer case so he can go into low and ground clearance so he doesn't tear up the bottom.
And I tend to agree with that because I've been with him. I said, we're not walking home, buddy. I'm telling you right now. Let's go get one of my vehicles.
You know, if we were kids, they'd make us get out, they'd go up the hill and then we get back in.
Or ride in the back to put pressure on the back.
Yeah, go up and down on the
Jump
bed.
up and down.
Yeah, okay.
So this is under discussion action, so the ask is that do we have to take action to approve you to go forward with buying that outside of the fleet process?
The bid that we got before was assumed that it was gonna be in the fleet. So that price is no longer good and the price is about 3,000 higher.
Okay,
So, yeah. I think
so do we make a motion to adjust the purchase price by 3,000?
Yeah.
I think that would be the simplest to do is to adjust the purchase price by do we have a final price?
not yet. I was just told it was no more than 3,000.
No more than 3,000.
Right, say not to exceed.
Not to exceed 3,000 over the original.
All right, well, I move that we amend the purchase information for the engineer vehicle to include not to exceed $3,000 additional because it's being purchased outside of the fleet agreement.
And I second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes. 5C, Mr. Sumner,
Stepped out.
he's asked to discuss. Mr. Sumner coming? Maybe
Yeah,
not.
he's on. There he goes.
Okay. We're on 5C, Sheriff, so.
I'm the Greeley County Sheriff. Sorry about that. I was on the YouTube watching out here and then there's about a 30-second delay. So I looked up and everybody's pointing at me to come in. My computer is about to die. So Mr. Gomez, Supervisor Gomez, I feel for you. I understand how sometimes downstairs doesn't work, upstairs it does, at my office it does, here it doesn't, different things. So anyways, moving on to this agenda item here. The other interesting thing is watching it, everything looks proper on the YouTube. And then you come in here, everything's reversed and flipped and everything's rating backwards. Greeley County insignia is backwards and stuff. So, looks interesting. But anyways, on this item, number C, 5C, my concern on this one, I just wanted to bring to your attention real quick is there was an agenda item sent in and it says discussion/action to replace the diesel fuel tank in Duncan, period. Nothing more. That's all. And if you have the agenda request form, I'm sure you can see that the actual request form that goes in for it to be on the board packet or your agenda today. However, this one doesn't end in period. After Duncan, there's no period and it says, and entering into a requirement contract with Synergy for fuel. I've got some major concern over that being agendized this way. I think it's improperly agendized. Honestly, I looked to see if at least I could get some insight to have some educated comment today and I can't. I know it can be argued I don't have educated comment anyways, but on this one particularly, all I get is an agenda request form. There's no documentation here. I don't see that contract, the requirement contract with Synergy Fuel. I was not provided that. I don't know if you were. If so, other people have requested it, were not provided that. I've got very serious concern with that because again, it's not, I think it's not properly agendized. I think that for talking about the diesel fuel tank in Duncan, I agree it needs to be replaced. I've seen it. You know, I was the one that called in, was having the major leaks down there. They've been doing a lot of work. I understand it needs to be replaced. I think that's a good thing. However, I don't see how it can get thrown in with the and this contract gets thrown in there. There is no contract provided. I've not seen a contract. I do know in me speaking with gas owners and locally, as you know, you set my budget. You said it. I dropped it down from 120,000 to 110,000. I've got $110,000 to spend on fuel. I've tried to spend it at local fuel gas stations. That's what I want to do in the future. And you set that budget for me to spend 110,000 in fuel. And so there's no contract or anything in place that prohibits that right now currently. I don't like that this is getting thrown in there real quick as a sidebar when it's a pretty big serious deal to have a contract. Also on your agenda request form, it does not have any budget at all under 4 financial impact. There's no financial impact listed here, which typically there is as number 4 above. And on top of that, it does say 5 legal review. Yes. It says it needs the review of the county attorney. However, there's no date of county attorney approval. I'm not sure if that was approved or not, and if that contract was approved or not. Again, if that was approved and it's already been seen and you have copies of it, the public did not get copies. I do know that there's people in the public, particularly business owners who own gas stations, who would definitely like to come and speak with you about this item if you're looking at a sole contract for all fuel to be through Synergy and not be able to be bought at local gas stations here in the community. So that's all I have. I really can't speak any more to it because I don't have the documentation to back anything else up other than the lack of documentation. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Derek, I think I agree that obviously we wouldn't be making a decision on any contract because we don't have the details and we haven't received the details, but I do feel that we can have a discussion about it. And
yes, and if I might, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Campbell, obviously the agenda request form is not the agenda. I'll be straight up front. Yeah, I adjusted the agenda item so we can have a broad field to be able to discuss this concern. We want to talk about the nature of the contract. It's what we call a requirements contract. I did have Gary look at that. There are 2 kind of unique contracts. One was an outputs contract. The dairy probably had that. In other words, you have an agreement that whatever we put out, United Dairymen will buy. The other is a requirements contract. Whatever you require, we will supply. This is a requirements contract, and it gave us pause as well. Not because of the procurement issues that we've tried to deal with in the past with the sheriff, but rather it kind of locks us in. These are not uncommon contracts in the fuel realm. For example, if you have a home that's sort of off the natural gas grid and you need to have propane, there are 2 providers in the area, Matlock and
Griffin.
Griffin. And if you purchase from one or the other, they will bring out a tank at no cost to you, set it on your property. They own the tank, but you have to buy your propane from them. It's the same sort of a structure we have here with Synergy. We have not gone back then and say, yeah, we're likely to do this, because it is something we need to think about. Interestingly enough, Tony was contacted recently by a person who's starting up a fuel delivery business, and this would preclude that. Maybe that's a good deal, maybe it's not a good deal. Reliability has been something that, make sure we can get fuel has been something. The cost of the tank is something the board would want to consider as well. We're not investing in a tank if we go with the Synergy's requirement contract. However, at a minimum, we think we should probably go back to Synergy and talk to them about limiting it to that diesel tank, or perhaps our diesel needs, as opposed to all fuel needs. One could read this. I think Gary told me as broadly as we'd have to buy all of our fuel oil and everything else from them. And I don't know that even Synergy, I'm not sure that's their intention. But the idea that they supply a tank and then we buy our fuel from them is not uncommon in this industry, but it may not be what we want to do. Or we may want to see if there are any other suppliers. As I understand it, Antonio knows better than I do, there are only one or two folks who bring fuel into our area. Is that's your understanding as well?
Correct, yeah. Synergy is one, Western Refining we used to use, but they weren't as reliable, so we moved over to Synergy. This is not the only tank that Synergy owns from us. The one at the landfill, the two at the airport, they're all Synergy tanks, and we purchase Synergy fuel from them. The only few tanks that are actually ours are the big 8,000 gallon tanks that are in Clifton and Duncan.
And Tony, did you get an idea of roughly how much our fuel consumption would be from this tank in an annualized basis?
Annually, we're over $20,000 to $30,000 out of that one.
So it's the type, it's obviously well beyond my spend authority, and this is one, because of the requirements contract aspect of it, I would bring to you anyway. And the other question, do you have any idea what a double-lined fuel tank would run?
No, I don't.
So therein lies the trade-off. Now, I know that there's been discussion back when we had our fuel purchasing issues we discussed earlier, who's the cheapest supplier? Fuel is one of those things that the margins are so small, there may be a slight difference, but fuel suppliers, wholesalers tend to sell on volume. In other words, if you sell more, you get at it at a cheaper price. Circle K's all around the state, no doubt, get it cheaper than we could get it because we don't use as much as they do. But there's not a lot of margin. I know that many of the fuel suppliers as well get them from the same tanks. Tony used to talk about when he was down in Phoenix, there's these huge resuppliers in the West Valley down off the Buckeye Road. And you'd see Texaco and Chevron and Circle K and Joe's Gas, and they're lining up and filling out of the same big tank. Or maybe they put some drops of whatever their thing is. But so it would be good for us to see if there's any over the long haul margin gains that we could do, but I suspect they're going to be marginal or minimal.
What's the size of the tank that we're looking to replace?
It was an 8,000 gallon. Now we're going down to a 2,000 gallon.
And they'll just have to come and
more
deliver more often.
Yeah, with Synergy, excuse me, we have monitors on them so that they can monitor it. We don't have to go down and stick them and call in the measurements or anything like that. So they monitor them. They pretty well deliver on their own. We don't have to call them and order fuel or anything like that. So that's a plus. Another thing with Synergy and owning the tanks is they take care of all the maintenance. The 8,000 gallon tank that was leaking would have been ours to completely maintain, fix, whatever. And double wall tanks are not exactly easy to fix or cheap to fix. So we would have been stuck with that totally. So they were swapping this out with a 2,000 gallon tank, and they did it based on our usage for that area, which is mainly just roads and ambulances.
Question, who fills that tank now?
Synergy.
Synergy, the 8,000 gallon tank?
Yeah, Synergy does all our fuel.
Okay.
We don't buy our oil and other automotive products from Dewey. I think what we could do is certainly go back and tighten up the language of the proposed contract
Mhm.
and also see whoever else is out there, see if there's a difference. I will tell you, Synergy has been reliable and I don't think we've had problems dealing with them, have we?
No, not at all.
And we've had this relationship. Before I was aware there was a relationship, and they've been servicing us for quite a while.
And since they can monitor it, will they guarantee you that you won't run out of fuel?
I don't know if they would guarantee it, but we haven't come close yet, so.
Well, you've had an 8,000 gallon tank and.
Right.
And
But our ones at the airport are 4,000. We haven't come close to running out there.
okay.
I'm sorry, Richard, Mr. Chairman, so the current ones have monitoring systems on them also?
Yes.
Wow.
But I think it's good to move forward with getting that contract and presenting that contract language to see what it looks like and presenting that for action at a later date.
We'll have it ready for a decision at your next meeting.
Sounds good.
I'm waiting.
Thank you. So, you have direction and I don't think we need.
No, we know where to go from here. Thank you.
Okay, so now we'll go to agenda item 6. And Mr. Sumner, you've asked.
Yes, Tim Sumner, Greeley County Sheriff, thank you again. On this item, again, I just want to, first of all, start off with the bigger item in the room, the elephant in the room issue is he's trying to usurp the authority of the sheriff yet again. This right here is a direct sheriff's office function, the Spillman. When we met in this very room with your administrator, Derek Rapier, IT CEO of BIDS, Kim Kwame, with most of the elected officials and department heads all sitting in these chairs right here. And they were up here giving us a presentation about looking at this new budget cycle, how some things will be broken up into your individual offices and departments as far as a line item for IT, for you to purchase a line item, IT supplies for, certain amounts. And then there's these big ticket capital type projects, right? Which this one was right from the get-go talked about a big ticket capital project. However, when that was discussion occurred, and it has been pretty consistent since then, is that those big items, whether it be under the assessor's office and the system that they use specifically and what is only for this, assessor's office, it's the assessor that talks about it, or the recorder's office in the elections, or when it comes down to the sheriff's office, yet again, even last meeting, we had the CIP presentation with you. Other electeds, other department heads were asked about different projects that were going on. I was sitting in this room as well, and yet the sheriff wasn't asked about the project that was discussed. Yet again, the CIP shows IT being the lead on this and the sheriff's office being secondary. However, my system administrator is our jail commander, Tyler Attaway. If you look at your contract before you that's looking for this, I'm sure this should be approved. Hopefully it will. It needs to happen. I think that there's no questions about that. It's already been discussed enough that it needs to occur through Mr. Rapier, through IT from us. And so anyways, if you look at the quote right on the top, it does say this was sent to Tyler Attaway at his email address, because we are the primary on this. This is our function as a sheriff's office, and it's been stated clearly. And yet when it comes down to it, this conversation occurred because Commander Attaway was working with IT, trying to look at the infrastructure needs, what all needed to be happening there. In the midst of doing all this, he wanted to get an updated quote. He met with Xeon, and talking to Xeon directly. He hasn't talked to anyone else about this. He's only been meeting with Xeon about this. And in the midst of that, Tyler showed him what the updated quote was. Tyler's our provider on this. IT backs us up on this, just like the other IT ticket items within the county, big ticket items that were for an individual office. That's where it should fall under the umbrella. It falls under the umbrella of the sheriff yet again. And so that's what I want to discuss about this. We were going to be sending forth an agenda request form and asking to discuss this item. So I'm not limited to the 3 minutes that's ticking away right now. And so I'm the one that gets limited when it's under my office and my purview to discuss with you. However, it falls under Austin Adams sends the agenda item request, and Mr. Attaway did not send this to Mr. Adams. He sent it to Xeon, and I don't know how it got around. I'm sure it went straight back to him, and he requested it. So it gives the floor over to, yet again, your office, not mine, and usurping the authority and me having the chance to discuss the needs and really what this is about. I will say one last thing. There was a new request or a new quote that came in just last night. Commander Adaway just informed me the quote is less because they were not aware of one thing that we did not need with a remote GIS server. It dropped the quote about $8,000, just so you're aware of that. Came in late last night. Commander Adaway forwarded it to me this morning right before the meeting. However, if I had more time to discuss it, which should be the case, because it really is my item under the sheriff's office and is directly related to the sheriff's business to be able to do my job and meet my needs for my constituents, I wouldn't be limited to the time right now. So again, just discussed it in the fact that the sheriff being usurped and you're trying to discuss items that are needed for the sheriff's office behind our backs. So appreciate your time. My time is well up, so I'll respect that. Thank you.
Thank you. Austin.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, this quote came across. This is something that was on the capital improvement plan to get the Spillman servers updated. My request on this, I called out and reached out to Motorola. Some of the big things on this with looking at that dispatch combined was asking, is those systems compatible? So that is something that I talked with the Motorola reps, and it is a compatible system for the split. The other piece on this is this also has a 5-year service agreement with it. So you'll see the price is pretty substantial, but those are yearly payments for the service and for the support. The original price, I believe, is right around $200,000. That would be what we're talking about, and that is listed in the capital improvement. So we do have those budgeted funds. And then the yearly supports after that, I believe, are about $40,000 a year. That's about the information I have on it. It is compatible if we go to a split system with Town of Clifton. So that is good news, and the system will work for that. Do you guys have any questions on it?
I don't either. So you've been working with the other partners, Sam?
Yeah, so I've worked with IT as well as the Motorola reps. So we've discussed this to look at this to see, is this the right option for us? And discussing with Motorola last week, I believe, they agreed that this would be the right system. And moving forward, if we do, like I said, do that split for dispatch for Town of Clifton, it would support Town of Clifton as well.
Anybody else have any other questions?
Well, my one question, is this a budgeted expense?
It is. This was specific under our capital improvement program, tier 1 project. We knew we were alerted last year by bits that the server was nearing its lifespan, the life cycle would need to be replaced. So yes, we specifically planned for this project as a capital project.
And my secondary question is that, currently the grand total is at the $368,824, but includes that 5-year management service. If there is a new quote that came in that's less, we just make the motion to not exceed the current grand total.
Correct.
If it comes in less, then that's great.
Correct.
Okay.
Any further discussion? If not, a motion would be in order.
Go for it. Well, I move that we approve of the purchasing the necessary components to upgrade and update the sheriff's office Spillman system in an amount not to exceed $368,824.59 as presented.
And I second that motion.
Do you have a motion second? Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you very much.
All right.
We'll go to agenda item 7. Mr. Rapier.
If you were the kind of a fool who would bet on what the legislature is going to do, you would be hard pressed to know where to put your money. I've talked to probably a dozen different people who live down there. They're there every day. And I've asked the simple question, do you think they will get out early and get their business done and go home and campaign? Or do you think this will be a long session with a lot of fights? And I bet it's about 50-50. Some think they're going home early, some think they're going home. And it's funny because they're not They're not, I think, they're sure they're going home earlier. They're sure they're gonna be here late. So why does that affect us? Well, two things. One, as long as they're in session, they can come up with ideas that affect our ability to operate. We've already reviewed, and Richard will no doubt talk about this in the LPC report, but we've already reviewed bills to monkey with zoning, to do some different things with building permits. And so there's always that danger they'll do something that essentially places a burden or a responsibility on the county, and they almost never attach money to those things. The other, of course, is that the budget deficit that up until the end of December, everybody was saying was 400 million this year, 450, 425 next year. It's doubled. With new revenue projections coming in, they are now projecting an $800 million deficit in the current year and about 800 in fiscal year 25 for a total of 1.6 billion. Now, they can do some things, and they're already talking about doing some things. The first tool in their toolbox is a clawback. And they're talking about taking money that was appropriated to certain projects, particularly transportation projects, but that has not been committed or funded yet. And they'll just pull that back. They're also talking about pulling money out of the WIFA water augmentation fund, agency cuts. But we know as sure as the sun will rise tomorrow that they will start looking, if this gets any worse, they will start looking to local governments to, and there's a million ways to do it. They can either simply withhold revenues, but more likely what they do is they shift to state responsibility and the price tag to a local jurisdiction, county, and make us pay for it. All of those things are on the table. The other thing that is on the table that is sort of whispered in the background, no one seems to know when or if it's going to happen. In fact, Bianca was on a couple of calls yesterday, and that is, how do we fix the election problem that we've got? If you look back over elections over the last 30 years, under the current recount, automatic recount statute, there would have been an automatic recount in just about every election for decades. So everybody's anticipating that's going to happen. It may be in the presidential elector, it may be in a congressman, it may be a statewide race for a corporation commission. But if even one of those takes place, it throws off the entire election calendar. If our primary isn't completed on time, then overseas and military voters don't get their ballots on time. But even more dire is if the general election goes into an automatic recount, we don't have a way to address that. We need about 12 more days. Then there's a good chance our electoral college votes won't count. We heard rumors when we were in Phoenix last week that they were going to call a special session on Thursday. We heard it again on Friday. It didn't happen. I believe on the calls yesterday, there's talk about special session this week or maybe next week. The challenge is that the further you get into that calendar is that emergency legislation. So this is 2/3 of both houses vote yes and the governor signs it. It goes into effect immediately, but the election calendar is already ticking. The last day to change or register to vote the presidential preference election, I believe is February 20th or 19th. And so it's the election calendar. People don't see elections till they show up at the polls, like in New Hampshire today, right? But Bianca's working at this year round. And so that calendar is already off and going. So we want to be aware of that. The most likely obvious outcome will be a shift in the August primary. The talk last week was that there seems to be settling on a consensus of moving it up ahead 1 week. So it would be that last week of July. There's talk about moving it in future years into May. So for the 2026 cycle going forward. How does that affect us in our budgeting? Well, we were fortunate. We anticipated some of this in our elections budget. So if we need to adapt, if we need to hire extra personnel to make it work, we have the funds in the budget to do that. It's mostly adjusting, getting a hold of candidates who've already pulled papers and letting them know of different deadlines, those kinds of things. Hats off to our elections director. She's on top of that. She's got the system of packets and so forth down so that it won't be difficult to contact them. It'd be easier for us than any other jurisdiction in the state, but it'll present challenges. The other thing I wanted to discuss and share with you is, as we talked about last time, our current, oh, I'm hitting the wrong button here. Our current budget and revenue structure and how things are going there. So you've seen this chart before, and I'll blow it up so you can see it here in the room. Have to not watch the screen and my computer because there's just enough of a delay that it there we go. So the yellow column is this year's monthly receipts from our shared sales tax revenue. And you can see what's happening. The trend is down. I don't think that 420 bumped up from 408 represents a trend yet. I don't know that we've already hit the trough and we're on the way back up. We could be. The biggest problem with the state's budget deficit right now is a revenue problem. The way you address revenue problem is spending. You cut spending, and where you budget annually, you allocate certain funds, then you either have to pull those funds back or reallocate them. The state is different than us in that we've got several revenue sources. Some are general fund revenue sources, but we run a lot of programs like the one you just approved with Mutual Link that are run out of other people's funds. I did ask specifically about Mutual Link and whether there's a chance those funds could be clawed back. The folks at CSA did not believe that would happen, but we want to monitor that for certain. And if those budget projection numbers get worse for the state, we need to be cautious. However, our contract with Mutual Link is clear that it will only be paid out of those state allocated funds. The next quarterly check will come in April. After the first quarter for the state of the fiscal year or of the calendar year. The April's a big time though, because you really don't know. The state has a major revenue source in its income tax, state income tax. The towns get some of that, we do not. So it doesn't affect our budget. But having gone to the flat tax, one analysis we saw last week showed that the amount of the budget deficit was just about equal to the cost of the ESA program combined with the loss of revenue from the flat tax to the 2.5%. So the state's budget deficit is a puzzle of their own making. But having made that, I don't see either of those two items changing. I do not see empowerment scholarships going away, and I don't see a change to the. It would take a super majority, I think, of 75% to pass a new income tax. We are monitoring that. Now, I'll come down here. Our projection in state shared sales tax revenue, say that 6 times and you get tongue-tied, was just a hair over 7 million. You can see our projected annual is off by 1.2 million. In other words, if the trend continues, and this is very simple math. I'll tell you how I do this. This is not high level. I take these numbers, add them all up, divide them by 6 for a average monthly revenue. The strength of that is it gives us a historic foundation. The weakness is it doesn't account for trends. And you can see really from the beginning, every month has been less than the previous one, except this month we're up a few dollars. On the upside is on the county half-cent sales tax side of it. Get that bigger. We see a similar trend towards the end. Our high months were here in September and October. And so this is down a little bit. We projected much more conservatively on our half-cent sales. So you see that our projected down here was $1 million. And we are projected under this average to receive just about 1.5. If you take the projected surplus in our half-cent sales and the projected deficit in our shared sales tax, we are down on the year by $750,000, give or take. Um, if things hold, we'll be okay. We always know there's some vacancy savings. We have turnover in various departments. There'll be some funds we don't spend. For example, we traded out a water truck for keep calling it a gravel shaker. It probably has a more sophisticated name than that. But we had originally budgeted to purchase a very sophisticated gravel and materials making machine. And we put that on hold in favor of the water truck, which was more urgent. Well, that water truck didn't cost us what the other machine would. So we've got those kinds of pockets throughout. Renee and I are starting to do some of our analysis to see where we're at mid-year in our expenses. Our policy, going back to our shared sales tax, and we will probably update this for next year, but our policy is that if we have 3 consecutive months of shared sales tax revenue that are under $400,000, then we start the graduated process of controlling spending. It might be don't approve new positions without coming to the board for specific approval. It may be we don't travel. I mean, there's things we can do. As we go forward, we did not adjust that $400,000 trip for inflation. It should probably be 425 or 450 as that trip. So, but even though that's in our policy, that doesn't mean we can't still adjust to lowering revenues. So if our next month, January, comes in at that same $400,000 level, then Renee and I will come to you with a plan of where we start to adjust. So we can get through the end of the year, not be in a deficit. And maybe we put off a capital project, maybe it's something else. ARPA funds, not concerned. Those are a different source. And the way we deal with those within our budget, it allows us to interject that money into the budget. But there may be other things that we're looking at that we need to say, let's put it off. And we'll come to you with recommendations. But I wanted you to be aware of the revenue trends. Let me show you one other item. I can pull it up real quick. Hope this will show up well enough. Okay. I'm going to focus here on this top area. These are estimated revenues. Was just occurred to me. I had some numbers backwards. And our estimated revenues, we're actually above on our, we'll still be below, but not as bad below on our shared sales tax. I plugged in the wrong number. I apologize. But nevertheless, this number and this number here are where our most volatile revenues are. That's our shared sales tax and our half-cent sales tax. Our vehicle licensing, we went conservative. We actually took the Arizona Department of Motor Vehicles projections on that, but it's not a big revenue source. And our PILT comes in dead on each time. That's not a concern. Rolling up here to the previous page, we enjoy a luxury that almost nobody else does. And that is that our actual property tax levy, this one here, we get 95% or plus more of that. And that's primarily because we have a taxpayer who pays on time every year and accounts for well north of 92-93% of our revenue. So those I'm not concerned about. Let me go back in and adjust those. I pulled off the wrong number 6. And I apologize for that. I had it right and panicked and looked at the wrong numbers. All right. One last adjustment, so. All right, here we go. We're having plugged in our actual projected revenues. We see that we're actually about in the same financial position. So we've got, wait. A $657,000 deficit in our shared sales tax. But our half-cent sales tax now shows about a $7,000 deficit over or under projections. We're still at about that $750,000 range. Again, this isn't a reason for panic, but it's certainly reason to be aware. And like I say, we will monitor this. We get our January numbers usually around February 8th, February 10th. But we'll be looking for areas to cut if we need to cut or hold. And it may be simply if we have vacancies, we don't fill them. And those, of course, won't be operationally significant. They will be strategic areas where we can afford to keep a position vacant. But we'll be identifying those areas to save that money. And that's what I have for our local budget and state budget.
Any questions? Thank you, Derek, and we appreciate knowing where we're sitting and an outlook, because it'll help the whole county plan.
It'll certainly have an effect on our budget development for next year.
Right, we want to stay ahead of the curve and not get behind the curve, so thank you, and looks like you're doing that. Bianca,
The only thing I have for the rest of the month is LPC, on the 26th. That's all I have for January. Going into February, LPC on the 2nd, February 2nd, Friday, our board meeting on the 6th. And then the NACO conference is on the 9th through the 13th, LPC on that 9th on Friday. The health trust meeting is the 14th through the 16th. And that's in Phoenix.
It is.
We have our LNA test. The Secretary of State comes to test our equipment for the PPE election in March, and that's on the 16th. Our offices are closed on the 19th. Our second board meeting, we'll have it on Tuesday, the 20th. Small counties, ECO and WIFA on the 21st. CSA Board of Directors on the 22nd. That's all I have for February.
Bianca, there's a SEGO board meeting and I'll get the date to you. I'm not sure which Friday it is right now.
Okay, and that's February. Okay. March 1st, Friday, LPC, our board meeting on the 5th, LPC on the 8th. County managers on the 15th, as well as LPC. And then the election day, the presidential preference is on the 19th. Small counties, ECO and WIFA on the 20th, CSA Board of Directors on the 21st. And our second board meeting is that Tuesday, the 26th. And LPC on the 29th. That's all I have for March. I don't need to add anything else.
anything else?
Those SEGO meetings appear to be, there's an administrative council meeting on the 8th. And an executive board meeting on the 23rd of February. Thank you, Supervisor Gomez.
So we have a. Moved it to the 26th in March, okay. Yes. Hey,
Nope.
okay, thank you, Bianca, and thank you for keeping that calendar update. I know it changes and it moves, but you do an excellent job at that, and we appreciate it. With, if there's nothing further, we'll go to agenda item 8. Consent agenda.
I saw move that we approve the consent agenda as posted.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this consent agenda? Not, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you very much. We now go to agenda item 9, supervisory report. Mr. Campbell.
Just quickly, had a meeting yesterday, with, on the Ag and Rural Affairs Steering Committee, getting ready for the NACO conference, and so we went through many proposals and lots of discussions, and so we'll escalate those conversations, at NACO back in DC, so, that's all that I have.
Thank you for your service. Mr. Gomez.
I really don't have anything. You're probably gonna report on the CSA meeting, but
Okay.
it was a pleasure being there. I was kind of enlightened by the legislative reception, which it was well attended. Things are good. Making contact with some of those folks. Also, we had a breakfast meeting with Mr. Richard Bark, which was very beneficial. And we're gonna keep in touch with him on what's going on here locally and get some things moving, hopefully. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you for that report. Well, first of all, the state of the state, I was able to attend that, and anyway, it seems like the governor and the legislators are still quite a bit apart. As Mr. Rapier alluded to, all the legislators feel empowered because everybody needs their vote because the slim margins of majority. And it's true, you talk to some legislators and oh, we're gonna get out of here. They're already talking budget, but until you see something come out, I mean, you hear a lot of things that don't seem to come to fruition, but there's a rumor that leadership is talking with the governor and to some of the legislators that they feel like they want to be part of the budget process, and it's in the at least last year, it looked like leadership. The governor got together on a budget, and then they came back and they got a lot of balking at the budget. Legislation. There's a lot of bills on that are coming forth. A lot of them will affect us. Some of them don't have much effect on the counties, but CSA, we are so fortunate to have the CSA there being our watchdog for all the counties. And I've said this many times, one thing that makes the counties powerful is, for the most part, we stick together. Whether and a lot of times the large counties have stepped up and taken it on behalf of the small counties, and there's been other times that the small counties have supported the large counties, and so it gives CSA a lot of credence. you're gonna see a lot of water bills. They haven't really started hitting real hard. As you know, Representative Griffin is chair. And to some people's demise, she sits on bills if she doesn't like them. That's why you get leadership. And some of the election bills. While you get leadership, you can, you have the ability to be a gatekeeper on some of those bills that you don't care for. And of course, being a gatekeeper, you get a lot of criticism. But I don't know if you'd asked me how the session's gonna be. They thought it was gonna be short last time, and they had the longest session in history. So, who knows, but, I appreciate the function of CSA, and we have great staff. And like I tell people, here in Greenlee County, we're a team. And that's been one of our strengths too, is because we are a team. People see us as the board united, as staff united, and it really helps. And anyway, that's my report. Eco, I didn't go to. Derek, you were there, and it was on water. And if you don't mind, would you be part of my report and just say, I know Rusty Bowers was there. And Dave Brown, if you don't mind.
Certainly, we heard a report from both Rusty Bowers, who now works for EPCOR, one of the largest water suppliers in the state, and he talked specifically about the push from rural to urban. EPCOR claims that they understand that rural still needs its water, but they also clearly understand the demand for water and rooftops and in the valley. The limiting factor for growth in the metropolitan corridor of our state is water. And it's primarily a legal, as opposed to, there is water to be found, but it is legally tied up with other 100-year commitments and so forth. It was very thorough, but the story was clearly told from a large municipal water supplier point of view. He was followed by Dave Brown, who has been a litigator in water litigation for decades now. It's now he's passed most of that practice down to his son. He made a very interesting observation, and that was there is enough water in the state to grow the state's population by at least 3 or 4. So we could end up with, 28 million people. He says, but you would have no agriculture, and there would be zero-scaped houses everywhere. There'd be no grass, no pools, no anything. And it would take all of the resources from every corner of the state to do that. And he says, so the real question that the state faces is, what do we want our state to look like? If we want our state to look like moon units with no vegetation and no agriculture, there's enough water to do that. But if we want to have a rural lifestyle, if we want to have agriculture grown in our own state, then he said, we're going to have to either augment. Nobody seemed particularly optimistic about water augmentation in the short future, maybe in the long, but not in the short. And so it's going to be a matter of allocating. He did discuss Representative Griffin's bill about taking water, a new approach to water management areas that would essentially monetize your water. You would own the right, and it could be sold or leased, which will place a market value of water on that. Talked about that, how that might make sense in the Wilcox Basin. But those were their reports.
Anyway, thank you. And that's concludes my report. If there be no further business.
I have something to report on the Greenlee County Advisory Committee meeting that I sat in on January 9th. I thought I hadn't brought my notes, but I found them here. I just want to mention that it was a very informative meeting that evening, which was held at the social club. And one of the highlights out of that meeting was that the Small Business Development Center, which is run by Eric Bejarano for EAC, reported that Graham, Greenlee, and which served Graham, Greenlee, and Gila, the Small Businesswoman of the Year nomination, was also, Greenlee County was also included, and there was a nominee which the community nominates. Julian Hernandez from Greenlee County was selected the Small Businesswoman of the Year, and she runs Sunflower Environmental that helps with environmental concerns. Also, he reported the Dream Builders program will be in Greenlee County at the Big Tex on January 24th. Is that the new restaurant that opened up there with the Chinese restaurant?
Yes,
Okay, and
I miss that Chinese.
there are 6 people who signed up for the Dream Builder program in Greenlee County. The group comes together once a week for about 2 hours. The network consists of those that have been in business for 10 years, starting a business, or those that have a business idea. And Eric Bejarano thanked Freeport for the support that they just awarded a $20,000 grant for the Women's Initiative Development Fund to continue the efforts of Dream Builder in Graham and Greenlee. The SBDC is a granted funded, so any money to support them is very beneficial. And they do a lot because these figures right here were the data from the SBDC fiscal year ended in September, and they finished by creating 117 new jobs, helped retain over 46 jobs, and helped start over 50 new businesses in Greenlee, Gila, and Graham. 50 new businesses. I was amazed when I heard that figure. And then last but not least, EAC is going to provide 2 new bachelor's degrees that will be available to take in the fall of 2024. And they are a bachelor's of science in health science and a bachelor's in music education that EAC is going to be providing the 4-year degree now. So anyway, that's my report.
Thank you.
EAC's hopping, and we were mentioned quite a few times in that meeting, and that was good to hear.
Okay, if there's no further business to be brought before the board, this board meeting is adjourned.